Hey humans, it's Hannah. Welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, I do videos on creepy and disturbing things. And today is actually our February's Patreon poll pick video. So my Patreons over on Patreon helped me pick this out in a poll that I gave them. Today we're talking about the case of Sharon Lopatka and ultimately trying to discuss and decide whether she was actually killed or whether this was some sort of bizarre assisted. All right, so Sharon was born in 1961 and grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. She had three younger sisters and both of her parents were Jewish Orthodox. She led an exceedingly normal, often described as just excessively normal childhood, normal school life, participated in sports, choir, nice young lady. She graduated from Pikesville High School in 1979. So all that early life, normal, yada yada, not much to report there. In 1991, when Sharon was about 30 years old, she married a man named Victor Lopatka. He worked as a construction worker, and Sharon's parents did not approve of the marriage whatsoever. I guess Victor, though, was a pretty strong Catholic, and Sharon's family being Orthodox Jewish, this is perhaps the reason for the tension. However, I don't know for sure. It's also very likely that Sharon actually married Victor not even so much because she was madly in love and wanted to get married, but because she needed a way to break away from her family and basically get some distance from them. She kind of wanted her own life. Her and Victor would move away to Hampstead, Maryland, where they would get a tract house. A tract house is basically a housing development where all the houses are pretty much identical and on the same area of land. Think the essence of suburbia or the intro song in Weeds. The two of them lived a quiet, reserved, again, seemingly normal life. Neighbors would later report that they pretty much never heard a peep out of the couple, barely ever interacted with them, and rarely saw them. So Sharon starts up her side business. If you look her up anywhere, she will be described as an internet entrepreneur. In order to make some extra money, she started several online businesses. The first one she started in 1995, so she was about 34, 35 at this time. The first website that she hosted was called House of Dion, where she would sell home decor guides for $7. Another business she had was selling her copywriting skills, basically charging companies to write their internet ads for them. She had other businesses, one where she would offer psychic readings, claiming that she was psychic, and on that same website selling love potions. And she would use an alias called Velado Dion. Remember, the first website was House of Dion, so she had some sort of attachment to that name, Dion. So the reason I'm going so in depth about the online businesses that she had is because they escalated and took a dark turn. She started another alias named Nancy Carlson, who was supposed to be this attractive blonde woman, and she started a pornographic website. And the reason I said it took a dark turn is because on this website there were photos of women who had been supposedly drugged, hypnotized, or chloroformed, and then in these videos proceeded to be essayed under this influence. It's especially disturbing because it's hard to find. I was trying to figure out if this particular fact was women, it was a role-playing thing, were the women pretending to do this, but they were actually in on it and were consenting to this, or not. And after doing a lot of digging, the only quote I could find from Sharon said that she had women both willing and unwilling that were doing this for her videos. So I would bet money that at least some of the women were not in on this, and she was actually participating in non-consensual porn on the internet. Yeah. It doesn't get much darker than that, but it will. She would try to sell her dirty underwear to users online under this alias Nancy. She then got really into the chat rooms and the fetish sites for people with fetishes that were not well accepted in our society. She joined feet fetish sites, BDSM websites, and necrophilia websites. I feel like this is a good time to just cut in here and quickly say that This story really associates all kinks and BDSM with something bad, or like it's really, really, really unacceptable. And I just want to cut in here and just say, remember, no kink shaming on my channel. For things like feet fetishes or BDSM, things like that, where it's both, where everything's under two consenting people who are both enthusiastically consenting, they have rules set up, they have safe word set up, they have aftercare set up, all of those things, like under the right circumstances, there's nothing to be ashamed of, and there's nothing wrong with those things. And I do not like the way that a lot of the articles about this story clump all of these things with the stuff that Sharon was doing that would not be consensual, such as the essay of these women under the influence she was posting videos of, or much more debatable topic, necrophilia. But I do not consider those things to be okay or consensual, and I just think it's really important to notice that those are separate categories. If everybody in the party is consenting, that's very different. And that's also to say that just because Sharon was into this fetish of actually dying after BDSM and everything, most people in the BDSM community, at least as far as I am aware, are not actually into that and would find that extremely concerning. Sorry for the tangent there. I just want to be clear that this particular case definitely generalizes and stereotypes people that are into these sexual things. Okay, so Sharon's obsession then becomes even darker. So they did find many messages on these websites from Sharon indicating that she had a very strong desire and interest to be not only tortured, but tortured until she was killed. Somebody actually did try to save Sharon and intervene. One of these other users on these websites who frequented these websites was actually a sex workers' rights activist. Try saying that 5 times fast. And this person's name was Tanneth. And Tanneth actually reached out to Sharon, told her that she was very concerned about all these things she was talking about, really wanted her to get help, wanted her to stop this and this behavior and stop encouraging this kind of thing on the websites, because that's not what the websites were about. But Sharon did not appreciate Tanneth trying to save her. She said, quote, back to Tanneth, "I want the real thing. I did not ask for you preaching to me." So Sharon it all gets darker and darker, and Sharon seems to be determined. Sharon starts soliciting people on these websites to ask if they would help her fulfill this fantasy of her. She actually did get several takers, but they really didn't think she was being serious. They just thought she wanted to have a very intense, realistic roleplay without actually going through with it. And several men backed out at the last minute once they realized that Sharon was being serious and that she wanted to make them an actual murderer. So that's where our friend Robert, aka Bobby Frederick Glass, comes into play. Bobby Glass worked for the government as a computer analyst in North Carolina. Bobby had a wife named Sherry and shared 3 children with her. However, in May of 1966, the two separated after a full 14 years of marriage. Sherry was already getting sick of Bobby spending so much time on his computer, but one day she just became really suspicious of Bobby and that it was more than that. So she actually went on his computer without him knowing, logged into his accounts, and found all of these incredibly disturbing, violent messages that he was exchanging with others in these chat rooms. And a lot of these messages were sent under pseudonyms. He would call himself Toy Man and Slow Hand. Depressed about his wife leaving him, Bobby continued on with these chat rooms where he would eventually meet Sharon. Bobby and Sharon met via these chat rooms in August of that same year, so only a few months after Bobby had separated from his wife. Later during the investigation, police would find almost 900 emails exchanged between Bobby and Sharon. Most of the emails were, again, graphic and violent and discussing together how Sharon really wanted to be tortured until she was killed, and then Bobby in turn describing to her how he would fill this desire and fantasy for her in very graphic detail. Now, it is important to remember that Sharon in these emails explicitly told Bobby that she wanted him to torture her until she actually died. Jump forward to October 13th, 1996. So they met in August. It's been a few months since they've been chatting so much online. Sharon tells her husband, Victor, that she is going to Georgia to meet up with some friends. However, in spite of telling her husband this, she left him a note that said something very different. The note had evidently told Victor that she wasn't coming back. It told her husband that he should not go after Bobby, and that if my body is never retrieved, don't worry, know that I'm at peace. However, Victor hasn't seen this note yet. He didn't see it immediately after she left. So Sharon takes off for North Carolina. She meets up with Bobby, who picks her up at the train station, and then he drives her back to his mobile home, but I'm pretty sure it's more like a trailer, which was about 80 miles away from Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, the timing of when her husband found the note varies from source to source. I've seen all these sources say many different things, so it's hard to pinpoint exactly what happened, but the general consensus is her husband eventually finds the note, I think a couple days after she was gone, but it is generally agreed that her husband called the police right after he found the note, saying that she wasn't coming back. However, it was already too late. Police did go to Bobby's mobile home and staked out the place for a couple days, hoping that Sharon would turn up there alive and well. However, there was no sign of her. Finally, on October 25th, police were able to get a search warrant for Bobby's home. Police found some of Sharon's belongings. They found drug paraphernalia, a gun, BDSM stuff, many computer disks, and worst of all, CP. And then they found Sharon's remains decomposing about 75 feet away from the trailer in a 2.5-foot shallow grave. Bobby was very quickly arrested, held without any bail, and he was charged with first-degree murder and possession of CP. Bobby did later admit to torturing Sharon, as she had requested that he do. However, he claimed that killing her was a total accident. He was never going to actually kill her, and that they were engaging in sexual activity, but that it just went too far. The autopsy did agree with Bobby's statement. The coroner did determine that Sharon was killed by strangulation about 3 days after she had arrived in North Carolina. Police disagreed that it was an accident. They continued to believe that Bobby did this on purpose and that it was premeditated, since this was all in the email evidence. So then, this is how Bobby's story ends. Bobby ended up pleading guilty, and so he only got a voluntary manslaughter charge as well as sexual exploitation charges. He got 36 to 53 months in prison for this. He then got an additional 27 months on top of this sentence on federal charges for second-degree minor exploitation. So if he had ended up serving his full sentence for all of this stuff he did, he only got about 6.5 years. He never ended up serving his full sentence, but he never made it out of jail either. He actually died of a heart attack in jail on February 20th, 2002. This was actually going to be shortly before his release on the first charges, and he was about to start serving his 27 months for the federal charges. Before I talk about the ethical questions about this case, I do also want to mention that there is a movie, a fictional movie that is loosely based on this case. It's called Downloading Nancy. It was like a little indie film, and Downloading Nancy being the alias that Sharon would use online, so it's a nod to that. And the movie does say based, or it says inspired by true events, but when they say that, they mean so loosely based that the movie had nothing to do with the real case. I did watch the movie. It wasn't great. It was pretty boring in my opinion, but other than the very, very basic premise, the movie had absolutely nothing in line with the real story. So I thought that was very odd. It seemed like they really just wanted to tack on the inspired by true events thing onto their movie without actually doing any research. I don't know, it was just weird, but whatever. Okay, let's talk about the ethics of this. The question that everybody, of course, is asking at this point, is Bobby guilty of murder or not? I guess I do understand both sides of this argument, and before you comment, please hear me out till the end. I do understand that, yes, by all evidence and indications, it did seem like Sharon genuinely wanted this fate to happen to her. But I do understand that even if somebody comes to you and says that, you still have a moral responsibility not to do it. If somebody handed you a gun and told you to shoot them for no reason, would you do it? No. And then there's also the argument that Sharon is essentially ill, and therefore she cannot possibly be in a calm, proper state of mind. And therefore, because of her not being in a sound mind, she cannot properly consent to something like this happening. However, on the other hand, and this is where it gets sticky, how is this kind of thing much different than assisted suicide? Many argue that assisted suicide should only be for people with terminal disease in great physical pain, and that because of this, and because their pain is never ending, they should be able to die with dignity, and not only that, but die on their terms and go the way they would like to go. But I've also seen the argument that people with extremely severe mental diagnoses have said that they are in so much emotional pain that it's just as bad and just as agonizing as endless physical pain. So they should be allowed this right as well. So if this was the case for Sharon, should she not get to go the way that she wants to go? As for the other argument about Sharon being and therefore she can't be of sound mind, and therefore she can't consent, couldn't you argue the same thing for those that have terminal illness or are in unstopping pain? Couldn't you also argue that they are therefore not of sound mind in order to make the assisted decision? Now, mind you, I'm really playing devil's advocate there. I am actually for assisted suicide in the right circumstances. And in the end, I lean much more towards the argument that Bobby is in fact a murderer and should not have done this just because Sharon wanted him to. In the end, we can't just be like, okay, well, let's change the laws so that killing somebody is illegal. However, if it's consensual, then therefore killing somebody is not illegal, and it's totally fine as long as you ask them to do it. I mean, that would just not work in any typical society that we have set up. Society would crumble and it would turn into chaos. You'd also have a brand new argument in court, and a lot of people would just say they wanted me to kill them. And that's, I mean, you just cannot, you can't do that. That's a slippery slope. So my final answer is that Bobby did in fact murder Sharon. It was premeditated, and I am glad that he went to jail. However, given his intentions were very different than most murder cases, just as we charge serial killers' intentions differently than the intentions of an accidental killing or second-degree murder, I think because Bobby's intentions were different, as he was killing her thinking that's genuinely what she wanted, I do think that it would be a little silly if he got life in prison for that kind of thing. As far as we know, Bobby had no other violent previous charges or convictions or past or anything like that. So who's to say that he would have actually killed anybody had she not approached him and encouraged him to do so? I also do think he probably should have gotten more than 6 years though. Maybe not life, but more than 6 years, because I do think if this was an accident, as Bobby said, he also would have called 911 right after it happened, and he didn't. He tried to cover it up. I also think there's an argument to be made for people staying in jail, or at least locked away somewhere, if you find and prove that they had CP on them, because that's just a time bomb waiting to hurt somebody. So I'm almost more concerned about the fact that he got almost no time for that. Anyway, that is going to be it for today's video. I know this week is just slightly shorter than normal, but I'm trying to catch up on all this YouTube stuff. So that is going to be it for today. Please let me know your thoughts down below. This should be a lit comment section. Thank you, of course, so much to all my patrons on the screen now, but special shout out to Colin Holmes, Deck of Cards, Creep Me Out, Michelle Valdovinos, Tom L, JJ, Dirty Kitty, Dawn, Quasi Eli, Little Kittle Cat, Whimsicott Fan, Delta Wolf 776, and Mitchell Meyer. Okay, thanks guys. See you next time.